Book 4, The Threshold. The weeks since the last encounter had folded into one another, impossible to separate. Time itself seemed thinner now, stretched and compressed in ways I could neither measure nor understand. Days bled into nights, nights into days. The echo of the clearing lingered in every corner of my perception. The forest, the ridge, the faint shimmer in the moonlight, they were no longer places I went to, they were places I carried. I thought I was adapting. I thought the first shock had passed, that the rhythm of life could resume, but the very presence had changed. It no longer waited for me to step outside. It had entered the quiet spaces, the pauses, the gaps between thought and sensation. At first, it was subtle, a flicker in the corner of my vision, a ripple in the air, almost too faint to notice. I told myself it was fatigue, stress, imagination, but the feeling grew, persistent, insistent. I began to feel watched, not by a stranger, not by another human, but by something that existed on a wavelength I could not map. One night, I woke with a start, convinced I had heard movement in my apartment. The street was quiet, cars distant, neighbors asleep, yet I felt the pressure again, that same calm, patient presence, pressing against the edges of awareness. I sat up, heart hammering, and caught the faintest ripple across the wall, colors, subtle, moving like oil on water, shimmering in the corner of my room. I told myself I was hallucinating, but the ripple stayed, undulating, responding to my gaze, and then the voice came, inside my head, soft but commanding. You cannot retreat, you are beyond retreat. I tried to speak aloud, my voice trembled. I don't understand. I've done as you asked, I've carried what I could, why return? Because it is not enough. I shivered, not fear, exactly, not panic, a kind of vertigo, a creeping understanding that the world I thought I knew had folded over itself and left me in the gap. Days grew longer, slower, every small act became magnified in my perception. A neighbor helping carry groceries, a bird landing on a railing, a stray cat curling in the sun, all carried weight, significance I could not ignore. I saw sparks everywhere, some fragile, some stubborn, some flickering against tides I could not control. I tried to leave the apartment, to walk the streets, to ground myself in the ordinary, but the presence followed, not with violence, not with threat, just observation, an awareness threading through every small detail, pressing against me until I felt exposed in ways I could not name. One afternoon, I stepped outside to a park I had passed dozens of times. The sunlight was ordinary, the air warm, birds chirping, but as I walked, the shadows stretched strangely, bending around me. Faint colors shimmered in the edges of my vision, and I realized, with a sharp, sinking certainty, that I was no longer the same observer I had been. I was a participant in a larger pattern I could not comprehend. That night, I returned to the ridge trail, not the clearing itself. I avoided it, knowing what awaited, but the path that led there. The air felt thicker, almost tactile, pressing against my skin. Every step echoed in my chest, and then, the shimmer appeared, faint at first, bending the moonlight into impossible arcs. I froze, heart racing. The Veilry, or something of its kind, emerged from the distortion, taller, more fluid than memory allowed. Its colors rolled across its form in slow, deliberate waves, not responding to me now, but to something larger I could not perceive. You understand too much, it said, voice calm and deep inside my mind. I swallowed, words stuck in my throat. I had tried to carry the sparks, to witness, to remember. Was that not enough? Understanding is only the first threshold. You must endure what you carry, even as it strains you, even as it bends your perception. I wanted to ask what that meant, but there were no answers I could name. Only pressure, only presence, only the impossibility of escape. The nights became longer. The presence did not always show itself visually, but I felt it in every pause, every glance, every reflection. Mirrors became strange, windows sometimes held a ripple that did not belong. The ordinary world seemed porous, as if every surface could carry the shimmer, the pulse, the weight of observation. I tried to sleep. Often, I could not. When I did, the dreams were heavier, less fragmentary, more like walking through an entire lifetime that wasn't mine but felt intimately familiar. I experienced kindness and cruelty in compressed, unbearable clarity. I felt the choice of humanity, of individual humans, pressing against my consciousness, and I could not ignore it. Sometimes, I wept, not from fear or despair, but from the intensity of knowing too much, from realizing that the smallest actions, a shared cup of water, a door held open, a word of comfort, carried far more consequence than I had ever imagined. Weeks passed like this, each day indistinguishable from the last, and then, one evening, the present spoke again. You are at the threshold. I did not understand. My knees buckled, my chest ached, I wanted to fall, to cry, to flee, but my body remained rigid. You have seen, you have carried, you have endured. The threshold is not an end, it is a beginning. What you have touched will follow you. You cannot step back. The colors shimmered slowly, curling around the edges of my vision. I understood, finally, that the clearing, the ridge, the forest, it was no longer a place, it was a part of me, and I was part of it. The air thickened, the night stretched, my heartbeat thrummed like some ancient drum, in time with a rhythm I could not identify. I realized, with stark clarity, that I had crossed a boundary, that the line between ordinary life and the extraordinary was permanently erased. I do not know how long I stood there, breathing, trembling, enduring. I only know that when I returned to my apartment, the world was the same and yet profoundly altered. The ordinary noises, the ordinary sights, the ordinary people, everything carried a resonance I could not shake. And I understood, in a way I had never before, that the very presence was no longer just an encounter. It was a lens, a measure, a weight, and I, unwilling though I was, had become its keeper. The threshold had been crossed. There was no turning back.